Hello, everyone, and welcome once again to the Legal Power Hour, where we jam 60 minutes of thought-provoking discussion into a 30-minute show designed to inform, protect our fellow American citizens. We are your co-hosts, Tom Scott and Sarah Nahidi, and today we are absolutely thrilled to have with us as our guest once again, Mr. John Kiriakou, former CIA counterterrorism officer, investigator for the U.S. Senate Committee on Foreign Relations, whistleblower, author, and activist. Did I forget anything there, John?
No, I once said that keeps me pretty busy.
I bet it does. I bet it does. Well, welcome once again to our show, John.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm always happy to be with you.
Thank you for coming back. We had such a great show with you last time. We were looking forward to having you on again. So thank you.
Thanks a lot.
And if our viewers remember, last year we had you on the show. We had a great discussion. Between then and now, I noticed you received the 2016 Sam Adams Award for Integrity. And it doesn't appear many people have received that award. Can you explain that and tell our viewers about that award and what it entails?
Sure. Sam Adams is not the founding father, Sam Adams. This Sam Adams was a senior CIA analyst in the 1960s and early 1970s who was the first person, really the only person, to warn the White House that the Pentagon was lying about its numbers of Vietnamese troops and Viet Cong troops that were fighting against us in the war. The Pentagon, for political reasons, was underreporting those numbers. Sam was Harvard educated. He had advanced degrees in statistics, and he was confident in his methodology. Of course, history has proven him right, but he paid for it with his career. He was sort of shunted off into a do-nothing position. He ended up resigning from the CIA in 1971 and then died of a heart attack soon after. He was only about 50 years old. But many of his friends remained for their careers in the agency, and when they finally retired and formed a group called Veteran Intelligence Professionals for Sanity, they established the Sam Adams Award for Integrity and Intelligence. It's been given out about a dozen times. I won it last year. Cy Hirsch won it this year. A couple of years ago, it was given to Ed Snowden. So it's generally been given to people who have advanced the cause of truth and intelligence and who have paid a price for doing that. I was humbled to receive it.
Wow, that's a big deal. Congratulations.
Thank you.
It's
behind me. I've got it in this cabinet right here. It's a candlestick is what it is, because it's supposed to signify bringing light into the dark recesses of the intelligence community.
How did you feel about that, and what was that like? What was that experience like to receive that award?
Oh, I'll tell you, when I got it, I had just gotten out of prison, and so it was, you know, prison does something to you, whether you like it or not, whether you think that it's happening or not. It wears you down into a little nub. And it doesn't matter if you think you were right or righteous. It doesn't matter if you think that you were screwed by the government. It doesn't matter if you think that you were set up for political reasons. You still come out, and most of society just looks at you as a convicted criminal. You're a convicted felon. So to be honored by my colleagues and my peers from the CIA, the FBI, NSA, Homeland Security, NCIS, it meant a lot to me. You know, it reminded me that I did the right thing when I blew the whistle on the CIA's torture program. And even though the price was high, it was the right thing to do.
Did it make you feel like what you did wasn't in vain completely?
Yeah, you know what? There have been a couple of things that made me conclude that what I did was not in vain. You know, the first thing was in December of 2015. This was 5 weeks before I was released from prison. I called my wife and I said, "Hey, how was your day?" And she said, "My day was great." I said, "Yeah, why?" And she said, "Because the Senate torture report was released today, and it proved that everything you said was true." And that made me feel good. I got out in February of 2015. And then in August of 2015, the McCain-Feinstein Amendment to the National Defense Authorization Act was passed, which expressly banned torture, exactly the kinds of torture techniques that we were using against al-Qaeda prisoners in 2002. And John McCain said that I was the inspiration for that amendment. So that made it all worthwhile.
That's very nice to be recognized by.
It was validating.
Who's devoted his, entire career to public service.
Yes. Yes, it was validating.
So, John, this is actually an award from your peers, then. So that really award from management or high levels is one thing, but from peers, the people you work with on a day-to-day basis, that means a hell of a lot more, right?
Yeah, and I'll tell you what else means a hell of a lot more. When I was incarcerated, 16 different CIA officers came to visit me in prison.
Wow.
Now, a lot of people didn't come to visit me, including relatives, because they were afraid of God knows what. Oh, the government's going to listen to my phone. The government's going to read my emails. Well, the government's listening to your phone, reading your emails anyway. These CIA people really took a risk, a real risk, to come and see me. But it was a statement that they wanted to make. And I was very grateful for the gesture.
That brings me to another question too, John. I mean, since all this has happened, have you pursued clearing your name or otherwise the record straight with people in general? I mean, as you said earlier, people look at you as a convicted felon. I mean, as a convict, basically. Most people don't realize how the legal system operates. It has the stigma associated with it. It almost should have an award. I mean, you look at Andy, you look at who else? Christ. I mean, who else? Paul.
Martin Luther King.
I mean, Martin Luther King, Nelson Mandela.
I mean, all have been to prison, and these are not notorious criminals. They're at the opposite end of the spectrum, right? These are people who should have been given a parade, not prison time, like you.
Yeah.
What is your approach? Have you tried to do anything to clear your name or to set that record straight?
Actually. Yeah, I have. I've been very blessed with crazy strong support in the Greek American community. And two very wealthy and well-known Greek American businessmen hired a lobbying firm to lobby President Obama on my behalf. I applied for a presidential pardon. And it was hard work. But what we ended up doing was we got a meeting with Vice President Biden. And we gave to him a letter signed by 70 retired CIA, NSA, and FBI officers asking the president to pardon me. We had a floor statement from my congressman asking the president to pardon me. We had a letter from the man who wrote the law that I was convicted of violating, saying that this is not why he wrote the law and that I should never have been charged in the first place. And then we found an op-ed from the Christian Science Monitor from 1981, written by one U.S. Senator Joseph R. Biden, saying that the law I was convicted of was unconstitutional on its face and should never have been passed. And so we went to see Biden, and he hemmed and hawed, and finally, because of his long association with these two Greek businessmen, agreed to argue my case to President Obama. And so the businessmen went with Biden to the White House 2 nights before the end of the Obama administration. They called me at almost midnight when they came out of the White House. And one of them said, "John, you would have been so proud of the vice president. He went to the mat for you. He really argued your case." And then finally, after about 10 minutes, the president said, "Guys, I'm just not going to do this. It's either this guy or it's Manning." And Manning got 35 years. Now, why Chelsea Manning and I are mutually exclusive, I have no idea. But Barack Obama made a hard and fast decision that he was not going to help me. Now, I probably don't have a chance of a pardon under Donald Trump, but I might. I've made some inroads into the White House. There used to be a lot of Greek Americans in the White House. They've all either been fired or indicted at this point. So I don't have the Greeks to rely on. But I do have one path into the White House that may help me. And in the meantime, an incredibly generous Republican congressman with strong libertarian leanings has voluntarily offered to write a bill that he would introduce in the House of Representatives, to be co-introduced in the Senate by Rand Paul, that would vacate my conviction and reinstate my federal pension. Now, that's a real uphill struggle, but I have to try everything. If I don't, I'll never forgive myself. I have to try everything.
Wow.
And this has to do with your federal pension too. I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, you know, it's not just the idea of having gone to prison for 2 years and then being on parole for, or not parole, but federal probation for 2 years. It's not just a question of losing my right to vote and losing my gun and my Second Amendment rights, but I also lost my federal pension. I had 20 years of proud service in the federal government, and so without that pension, I'm going to have to literally work until the day I die. I had $770,000 saved in that pension. I'd like it back.
Wow. That seems very unfair and very, very much
Extraordinarily harsh.
Wow. I had no idea, like Tom said, that was connected and part of it.
Yeah, when I say the price was high, I mean the price was literally high, very high.
Well, yeah, we both, Sarah and I hope our viewers are pulling for you to get this done, because that's a little ridiculous. It's legalized theft. It's legalized theft is what it boils down to.
That's exactly what it is. I had a legal dream team here in Washington too. I had 11 attorneys, 3 different firms, major partners. The Washington Post called my attorneys legal titans, and one of them told me recently. He said, I knew that Obama wasn't going to pardon you, because it was as though we were asking Obama to say, my bad, I shouldn't have prosecuted him. I'll pardon him. Sorry about that. Well, that was never going to happen. But he said, you've been so clearly wronged by our government. You're going to get that pardon one of these days. It may not be with this president. It may not even be with the next one. But eventually you're going to get that pardon.
I fully believe that should happen, and
hope so.
It would be a great miscarriage of justice if it didn't happen.
Thank you very much.
So I hope it happens under this president.
Thank you. I hope so too. Like I say, I have one avenue into this White House, and I'm going to give it a try.
If we could too, one thing, I'm not sure if our viewers have heard about Thomas Drake, Jesselyn Radack.
Right.
The documentary, I guess it was Silence, the film directed by James Spioni. Can you explain what the message is in that, and how your role and the role of Thomas Drake and Jesselyn Radack?
Sure.
This whole thing together.
Sure. Jesselyn Radack was one of my attorneys. She had been the director of ethics in the Justice Department. And in the immediate aftermath of the 9/11 attacks, when John Walker Lind, the American Taliban, was arrested, he was arrested on a weekend. And so FBI agents called the Justice Department from Afghanistan. Jesselyn was on duty, and she answered the phone, and they said, we caught an American. What do we do? And she said, the first thing you have to do is read him his rights, right? He has a constitutional right against self-incrimination. They did not read him his rights. And in fact, he made confessions to criminal acts. Well, a few days later, when the Attorney General announced his arrest, the Attorney General specifically said he had been read his rights and he waived them. That was a lie. So Jesselyn went through the chain of command to lodge a complaint. She was told to keep her mouth shut, and instead she went to the press. When she went to the press, she was fired from the Justice Department. But worse than that, the Justice Department filed a complaint against her with the District of Columbia Bar Association to try to keep her from ever working as an attorney again. And worse than that, they put her on the no-fly list as a terrorist sympathizer. In fact, all she ever tried to do was to protect the constitutional rights of an American citizen. She wasn't taking a position on John Walker Lynd's politics. She was just treating him like any other American in trouble. Now, Tom was a senior executive at NSA, the National Security Agency, and Tom stumbled onto this program called Thin Thread, where Michael Hayden, who at the time was the director of NSA, had authorized a program to spy on American citizens. Now, this is clearly unconstitutional. And besides being unconstitutional, it's a violation of the NSA charter, which specifically forbids it from spying on American citizens. Tom went through his chain of command. He went to the Inspector General, was told to mind his own business. He went to the General Counsel, was told the same thing. He went to the DOD Inspector General because NSA is a DOD agency. DOD actually destroyed the evidence that Tom brought out with him. Finally, he went to the Congressional Oversight Committee. He went to the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence and reported this. Now, this is the very definition of waste, fraud, abuse, and illegality. And instead, what happened was the FBI charged Tom with 9 felonies, including 7 counts of espionage. Well, he hadn't committed espionage, obviously. He was working for the public good. NSA was in violation of the law. DOD Inspector General was in violation of the law. The case against him ended up falling apart, and all of those felonies were dismissed, but not before he cashed in his pension in order to pay his lawyer bills. He was arrested and fingerprinted and booked and finally released. His wife left him because she was an NSA employee, and the FBI said, "We're arresting your husband this morning. You're either with us or you're with him." And she chose to be with the FBI.
Oh.
And now here he is, a national hero. And the only work he can get is to work as a clerk in an Apple store in Bethesda, Maryland. So Jim Spione is an Academy Award nominated documentary filmmaker. When I was arrested, he asked through Jesselyn Radak if he could film me for the year leading up to my trial. Against my better judgment at the time and against the wishes of my entire legal team, I agreed. And I'm glad that I did. Jim really was able to tell the story, not just of my case, but of Jesselyn's case and Tom's case, and the unconstitutionality of so many of the different things that our government does in the false name of national security. We were all nominated for an Emmy Award last year, which was like a bizarro kind of weird experience. But here we are, 3 people who have been charged with a variety of national security crimes. And none of us had committed national security crimes. Thank God none of us had been convicted of national security crimes. And we found ourselves at the Emmy Awards last year.
Do you?
So, Jim Spione, I owe him a great deal. He was really the only one who was able to get our story out there for the American public. And in fact, the documentary has been so successful, I think it's still on Netflix, Amazon, and iTunes. It's called Silenced.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do you have any idea? I mean, these stories are, incredible and unbelievable to people who just don't understand that these kinds of things happen and happen a lot in our legal system.
A lot.
I mean, do you think that this has been happening for decades and from the beginning of this country? I mean, has this been happening and we don't know? I mean,
no, it's been happening since September 11th. Everything changed on September 11th, and not for the better. So many people were so more far-sighted than I was, because I believed that once we defeated Al-Qaeda, we would get our September 10th country back. And that just wasn't the case at all. There were others in the national security structure, the National Security Council, CIA, NSA, FBI, Homeland Security, who decided that no, this 9/11 attack, this was a game changer, that they were going to be able to do anything they wanted. And it didn't matter if they didn't have a warrant. It didn't matter if they didn't have legal cause to, for example, intercept every email that every American writes, or to intercept and put in a database every telephone call, every text message that every American ever makes. They have enough storage space between what they have in a facility in Utah and a new facility they're building outside of Fort Detrick, Maryland. They have enough storage space to hold this information for 500 years. Well, that's not what the Constitution says they can do. So the rest of us you know, as Americans, we have to stand up and we have to say this is wrong. It's illegal, and we're not going to allow it.
Do you think that the
only
U.S. will ever go back to
No.
a non-surveillance state, or not? Obviously, once something like 9/11 happens, you can never go backwards. But do you ever think that we will retract a little bit and not be as much of a, you know, Big Brother kind of situation?
We may be able to dull it a little bit. And the only reason I say that is thanks to the revelations of Ed Snowden, Congress has just now begun to act on some of these mass surveillance issues. Last year, for example, in the House, and this originated in something called the Freedom Caucus in the House of Representatives, it's a Republican caucus on the House side, but it's very libertarian in its leanings. They were the first ones to stand up, for example, to Section 720 of the National Security Act, allowing warrantless wiretapping. They were the first ones to stand up and say that there ought to be a sunset provision to the Patriot Act. And by God, there ought to be a sunset provision to the Patriot Act. The Patriot Act should have to be renewed every single year because times change, technology changes, and public will changes. And I, for one, don't want my government spying on me or on anybody else, not without probable cause and not without a warrant, which is what the Constitution calls for.
Yeah, we write about the USA Patriot Act in our book, and you know, we refer to the government's knee-jerk reaction after the calf has already left the pen.
Exactly.
Right, and the USA Patriot Act has further militarized average police. It's enabled more spying on it's done everything that it was intended not to do, and that's how laws that are passed recently since 9/11, as you say, have become misused. I mean, the intent, the USA Patriot Act, there's a few we write about in our book, but inevitably, you know, these laws further infringe upon our specifically Fourth and Fifth Amendment rights, as you just said, and it's getting worse.
They absolutely do, and it is getting worse. I read recently that the Ohio State University campus police, right? The campus police for an American college recently took delivery of a tank. For what reason? What in the world is the Ohio State University Police Department going to use with a tank? Tanks are for killing people. Is that what they're going to do with it? I doubt it. So they shouldn't have that tank. You know, I read something fascinating a week or two ago too. You know, we've had somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,100 police killings in 2017. This is the police shooting innocent people. 1,107, according to the American Civil Liberties Union. The conclusion, the reason that this has happened, according to the ACLU, is that the average American police department spends 90% of its time on shooting, practicing shooting and different tactics, and 10% of its time on negotiation training. Conversely, in the UK, there were 10 police shootings last year. Now, this is a country with the same population as California, roughly. 10 police shootings, but they spend 70% of their training time on negotiations and only 30% on shooting. There's something for us to learn there.
Yeah, you know, the whole thing with the police and the mentality in this country, it was almost like a ratcheting effect. You know, the police become more aggressive, right? So people are more afraid of the police, right?
Yes.
So they become more intimidated. So they're more likely to react, right? And maybe even like all these police shootings of the police themselves, which makes the police more irritable and more trigger happy, which makes the people more afraid. So you get this constant, the whole thing just explodes. And I think that's what we're seeing today, right? I mean, how many police, 100 police shootings, but the shootings of the police themselves. And,
Yes.
you know, it's not that I condone it. I don't condone it whatsoever, but I can certainly explain it.
Yeah, I agree with you. But now we've gotten to the point where we have communities in this country that see the police as an occupation force because they're all in black with body armor and Kevlar. They have advanced weapons. I mean, what are you supposed to conclude?
They're out to kill people. That's what Americans think now. I mean, especially if you're certain races and people that are targeted. I don't blame people for being scared of the police. I mean,
I agree.
It is something to be feared.
I agree.
But there's fear.
I'm afraid of the police. Yeah.
Yeah. I hate to say that I kind of am too.
Yeah, I am too. And there's fear on both sides, and it's warranted given the fact that, you know, they carry guns, and a lot of Americans carry guns, and guns are made for one purpose and one purpose only, and they're made to kill people.
Exactly. That's it. They're made to kill people.
So it's understandable. It shouldn't be happening. It shouldn't be happening the way it's happening. And I hope that, you know, all these stories and all the information about the unnecessary and brutal and, you know, police killings for no reason. I mean, I hope that will make police departments change how they operate.
You know, I think that the only thing that's going to make police departments change is police prosecutions. When police departments realize that there's a price to pay when you shoot a man in the back, for example, who's running away from you after a traffic dispute, or this terrible incident we had in Minnesota a couple of weeks ago, where a woman called 911 because she heard somebody being beaten in the alley behind her house. The policeman pulls up. She comes out of her house to talk to the policeman. He rolls down the window of his cruiser and shoots her point blank range and kills her. And then the district attorney said that he doesn't think that he has enough evidence to charge this cop in court. Well, they're not going to ever learn their lessons unless there's fallout, legal fallout. You can't just kill people with impunity. At least you shouldn't be able to kill people with impunity.
Yeah.
And the police do in this country.
There should be no blanket immunity. You're right. I mean, they need to be prosecuted if you kill somebody for no reason. That story.
Yeah, I mean, we do have a thing called involuntary manslaughter in this country. Yeah. So, you know, charge it and prosecute it.
Yeah. Like Sarah says, there should be no blanket immunity for police, lawyers, judges, no blanket immunity whatsoever. And one thing I can tell you is I would never call the police for anything. I mean, somebody could have a gun to my head. I would still not call the police because that just, to me, it escalates the situation. I really can't justify it. I'm John. I mean, this is always a great conversation with you, but we have two questions. I hope we can get these questions in.
Sure, I'll speak quickly.
One of them, from this point forward, right? Now I'm quoting you on your website. From this point forward, I know my mission for change. Can you expound on that? What would you like to do? What would you like to see happen?
You know, my wife said something when I was first arrested. She said, if they thought that this would silence you, they don't know you at all. And she was right. You know, I like to think that I'm well known enough or notorious enough in this country that I have a soapbox. I've got a daily radio show in Washington, D.C. on 105.5 FM. I have a weekly column in reader-supported news. I'm on the news shows all the time, CNN, Fox, MSNBC. People listen to what I have to say. And I have a lot to say on issues like prison reform and sentencing reform and respect for the Constitution of the United States. And so I'm going to keep talking until they're sick and tired of hearing it, and they either do something or they stop inviting me onto these shows.
I mean, that's the latter. That they keep sorry. I hope that they keep inviting you on the shows and that they keep it effectuates a change.
I hope so. I hope so. So far, so good. Knock on wood.
Sarah, is there anything else you'd like to ask John? I mean, we're pretty close. The only thing I have is, you know, John, what would you like to see change or happen with the legal system, and what would you say to other people who have never experienced that system to the way you have, and warn them about it?
I think I'd like to say two things. First, what we need, and second, what I would say. What we need is to do away with mandatory minimum sentencing. When 1 out of every 4 black men in this country, 1 out of every 4, imagine that, is either on parole, on probation, or incarcerated in either jail or prison, we have a problem. When 1 out of every 2 black men has spent time in jail or prison, that's a problem. When 1 out of every 9 adults, I mean, walk down the street. How many people do you see on the street? 1 out of every 9 adults has a felony conviction. You have a problem. We need to do something about charge stacking, about overcharging, about venue shopping. We need to do something about prosecutorial discretion, which really is just ganging up on somebody whose politics you don't like in many cases. The problem is in the Justice Department. Something has to be done there. The advice that I would give, and I cannot be any more crystal clear than what I'm going to say right now, do not ever, under any circumstances, talk to a cop or talk to the FBI. And I mean especially the FBI, because they will lie, they will cheat, they will twist your words, they will take them out of context, and they'll use them against you, and they'll charge you with the felony of making a false statement. You cannot trust the FBI. I've told Ed Snowden this, I've told Julian Assange, and I'm telling every American who is watching this today, don't talk to the FBI.
Wow, very strong words of advice. Thank you, John.
Thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure to see both of you.
Yeah, thanks, John. We wish you the best this year. Keep up the good work. Keep doing what you're doing. Yeah.
We can't wait to have you on again and hear about what the latest update is.
Fantastic. And in the meantime, I hope to see you at the Libertarian Convention.
That would be great.
Looking
forward
to
it, John.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Yep.